Okay, how's that? That's okay, great. Okay, so I'm super excited to talk to you about this topic of bringing more women to free and open source software. I find that this is such a funny topic. I was actually just saying this before, that it's a funny thing in free software. If you're a woman in free software, you're considered an expert on women in free software. And I just want to thank you all for coming to this talk and looking around. The percentages here of women participation is so much higher than at so many of these events, in this room, and it sort of gives you an idea of what things could be like. So I want to talk about bringing more women to our space. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the executive director of the GNOME Foundation. Before that, I was a lawyer at the Software Freedom Law Center. So I'm pretty much the luckiest lawyer in the world because I've had this series of great jobs. And I also do pro bono legal advice still with SFLC, and I'm an officer of the Software Freedom Conservancy, and I do pro bono legal work for questioncopyright.org. I'll get to this next line about the AIDA initiative and outreach program for women, but I'm still a cyborg in that I do work on implanted medical devices, and I have my own pacemaker defibrillator screwed into my heart. So one of the things that I just want to sort of get out of the way is sort of why we need to talk about women in free software. I think for all of you here, you guys are pretty with it, a pretty savvy audience. You know that in our space, it's a real problem. We don't have that many women. But I find that people who haven't experienced this directly aren't necessarily aware of how bad it can get. There is a lot of sexism and a lot of subtle sexism in our space. I can tell you anecdotally about my own experiences, which have been kind of strange. When I started out, I went to engineering school originally. I'm pretty geeky. I'm used to there not being that many women around, but I also, originally came from a place of saying, well, I really don't want to talk about this issue. It's not my issue. I just want to do the work I want to do. I don't want to talk about it. And we're still, I think it actually gets worse if we start talking about it all the time, because it means that since I'm a woman in technology, I suddenly make it about all women in technology. And that's not something I want to do. So I was sort of like, let's just fix the problem. The only way I can fix it is by doing the work I want to do, by being in technology and being somebody there, and I don't want it to be an issue. And then, and I found that to be the case in the engineering world that I was in before. Then I went off to law school, and there were more women than men in law school. There were, it was a totally different corporate environment, and very interesting. And then when I came back to the technical world to work at the Software Freedom Law Center, I was really surprised over time about how my attitude changed. I couldn't believe that, when I would go to check in to speak at conferences, if I were talking to a male colleague of mine, the people at the conference desk always assumed that he was the speaker. And that I was, I'm often asked if I'm, a spouse of somebody who is attending the conference. There's an assumption that, I'm not, I don't necessarily belong, and it gets really off-putting over time. A lot of people assume that I have no real technical background because I was a lawyer. They say things like, oh, well, if you ever wrote code, you would know that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, come on, I did write code. I have, I probably wrote a lot more Fortran than you did. Okay, maybe a little more Lisp, I don't know. But it was in another life for me. But the assumption that I don't have those skills is really, really terrible. There are all these other really subtle points that that I don't want to really get into too much. But I'll just cover the statistics. So we know that 25% of all software developers are women. So that's, in proprietary software primarily. We know that 18% of currently graduating computer science students are women. And then we know that, I'm going to skip, I guess, that 3% in free software are women. which is amazing. It's just such an amazing gulf, an amazing difference. And then a better percentage is the Google Summer of Code participation recently, which is 8.3%, which I think reflects a lot of effort done by the Google team. Kat's here, which is great. And then this last statistic is from GNOME. It's GNOME specific. In 2006, we had our regular Summer of Code applications. I wasn't with GNOME at the time, but we had 181 applicants, and not a single one of them were women, which is amazing and terrible. So getting back to sort of like the very fundamental nature of sexism in our space, I really don't want to dive into some of all the motivators and things. I want to be more proactive on a discussion and talk about what we can do to change things. But I recommend that you check out the Geek Feminism Wiki and read all the great stuff there. There's resources for allies that I think has like tons of links to really interesting stuff. And then I recommend this article that came out recently by Joseph Riegel, which is called Free Isn't Sexist, Free Culture and the Gender Gap, which is sort of an academic approach to our space. And I found it very, very interesting. So in 2006, we as in GNOME, realized that there was a real problem. And so the GNOME people at the time got together and decided they wanted to create a program to sort of address this. And they put together an outreach program for women. It didn't run for, I think it ran for only one or two, do you know, only 1 or 2 rounds. It was moderately successful, but none of the women that were participating in the program necessarily stuck around in the community, and it kind of faltered and fizzled out. And then a few years later, a new initiative was formed, and a couple of female developers at GNOME were asked to help form it. And among those developers was Marina Zurikinskaya, who is an amazing person who has co-runs this program with me at GNOME. And the idea behind this program was to sort of like think systematically about all the reasons why we think women aren't here. So every discussion about women in free software, we're always saying, well, I think the reason why they're not here is because there are better opportunities in proprietary software. Women want paid jobs right away, or women aren't here because they, we expect that we think they're intimidated, or we think that our culture is so negative that when women participate in the mailing lists, they get turned off and they leave. So we tried to take all of the things that we could think of that were possible barriers for women, and we tried to address them systematically and build that into the program. So what we've done is we do 2 rounds a year. One is in alongside Summer of Code, and we're very much inspired by Summer of Code as a way to bring women into software and to sort of like take it as it's really good for sort of very knowledgeable applicants who have the talents but aren't necessarily involved in free and open source software yet. And we pay the same amount that Google pays in Summer of Code, because why should women make any less? So we have, so we basically set it up in a similar way, but we do things a little bit different, and I'll get to that. Since we've been, so this is our track record before we participated, before we had the outreach program for women. As you can see, our number of women participating in Summer of Code was like binary numbers, just 0 and 1, compared to really substantial participation overall. In GNOME in 2009, when we first launched this program, 4% of our attendees at GWADEC were women, only 4%. So you can see Marina in the middle, who runs the program there. Other than that, you sort of can find the women, but you have to really hunt. And so this is the poster that we originally had that we've been using when GNOME first launched the program. And as you can see, we're targeting women specifically because a lot of women are less likely to apply to the program if they think that there's an intimidation factor. So when we specifically target women, much more women apply. And in my anecdotal conversations with participants of the program, many of them have told me that they would never have dreamt that they could have had an internship like this. That it was because we specifically made it available to women that they thought that maybe they could be good enough or that this program could be for them. So, and many of them didn't think that, that they could apply for Summer of Code either. So one of the things that we do is when we get applications in for the outreach program for women, we take a look at them and we say, you know, oh, does this make sense as a Summer of Code application? And we help those women develop their application for the Summer of Code process. So it sort of, you know, helps them, because some of them have never heard of Summer of Code and have only heard about the outreach program for women, but some of them have heard about Summer of Code and know how awesome it is and are totally intimidated by that. And they're like, oh, you know, I would love to do that, but clearly I'm not good enough for that. And, you know, it's amazing. So when somebody says to you, no, you are, you know, this application, you know, I've looked at your resume, I know that you have these skills, why don't we talk about what's a good application? So so that's pretty great. So in 2011, 7 out of 27 of our GSOC participants were women. And in 2012, 5 out of 29 were. So when we had the years and years, yeah, right, so great. So we had years and years of just 0 and 1, and all of a sudden we're up to 7 and 5. It's so amazing. And in the time that we've done the outreach program for women, we've had a complete success with changing the demographic of GNOME in fundamental ways. So, so we have many more women participating. There was a recent study done by Kevin Carrillo about newcomers, and they just basically surveyed 12 different free software organizations and asked people for their experiences and how they got involved in free and open source software and whether they had a good experience or bad experience, things that could be improved. And from the respondents of this study, 50% of the newcomers from to GNOME were women, as opposed to an average of 6%. For all, you know, for the other projects, the next highest level of respondents were 15%. And then we had, so that 50% was 22 women. The next, so that was 22 women. All of the other projects only had 20 women respond combined. So we're really seeing results. And when you take a look at our most recent GWADEC photo, there are many more women. We were 17% at that conference, which was a hell of a lot better. And pretty exciting. And I'd also like to point out that the women that were there were not all outreach program for women participants, because once you get more women participating, you get more women participating. Your atmosphere changes, it becomes a much more welcoming environment for women. So, so we had so much success with the outreach program for women that we realized that we shouldn't just keep it for GNOME, because this is a problem for free and open source software generally. I mean, you know, as we were saying when we first sat down here, that, you know, going to a typical conference in our space, it's like, if you're a woman, you're one of the only women in the room quite often, and it's, you know, it's a bit tough. And so we realized that we needed to do this for all projects. So so we started out by talking to my buddy Bradley at the Software Freedom Conservancy, and the Twisted project joined us and did exactly the same thing. They had their own intern and handled the program in exactly the same way, and we did it as kind of a test. And that test went really well, and we decided that we needed to expand the outreach program for women across as many projects as we could possibly want to join us. So so that's what we did. We rebranded the program. So instead of our awesome GNOME lady, you know, with her martial arts kick in the GNOME foot, we now have our friendly little GNOME robot, which is less GNOME specific, and a global theme with that's, you know, just to be inclusive. And we've also changed our slogan to make a difference, support software freedom, and sort of making the tenor of this, you can do social good through software, and bringing women in this way. And then we had a phenomenal response with projects wanting to join us because other free software projects had heard how successful this was for us. So we actually had 25 interns across 10 different free software organizations. And that included, in addition to GNOME, Fedora, and Tor, and JBoss, and Wikimedia, other, you know, great projects. I have another slide later where everybody is listed. So I think that part of the reason why we're so successful isn't just that we do the program. It's because of that sort of systematic approach to, what are the things that often keep women out of our space, and how do we overcome them? How do we make it easier for them to get involved? So, so one of the things I was saying before was that we address women directly, and I already talked about that. Another thing that we do is we accept non-students and non-coders. We have we don't have any limit. Well, actually, we have a minimum age requirement because GNOME is a California corporation, and we can't contract with a minor. So we have a minimum age of 18, which is actually interesting because I think that there's a need to get women and girls involved much earlier in their career. When I was talking to Beth about this before, and she has some really interesting ideas. But for our purpose, we have a minimum age of 18. And what's nice about it is we really have gotten a diverse group of women coming into our project through these programs. They're not just young women. Some of the women are older. The only requirements for being in the program are that you're extremely talented, that you want to work on one of the projects that we have mentors for and we have set up, that you identify as a woman. And we do that intentionally. So the program is open to everybody who identifies as a woman, which is much more inclusive. And it means that we also get people who are interested in working on marketing and documentation and design, all of which are really critical to free and open source software, and also really hard to recruit new people. Some of that stuff is really thankless work, and the women who have been coming through those parts of the program have been very committed to the projects that they intern with. One of the things that we do. We also connect women with mentors, and there's basically a feeling that a lot of women are much less likely to sort of jump in there and ask people for help, and they're more likely to find a mailing list a little bit more intimidating, or not want to bother an established hacker in the community. There's a prevalence of imposter syndrome amongst women. Men also have imposter syndrome, but it's more prevalent amongst women statistically. So what we do is we just make our mentors available. We identify them in advance on our website, and all of us who are committed as mentors are committed to responding to newcomers and making them feel welcome. And I think that makes a big difference. It helps them just figure out where to get started. We also require contribution as part of the application, and Marina came up with this, and I think that this is one of the biggest reasons of why the program is so successful. As part of the application to the program, women must make an actual contribution before their application will be even considered. And the contribution can be quite small. It can be just fixing a really small minor bug. It could be, if it's a documentation project, it could be just rewording a paragraph. It doesn't need to be a lot, but because women are making those initial contributions, well, there are a couple of things out of that. One is that even though we can't accept everybody that applies, this last round we had 100 applicants. We had many more inquiries, like many more people who are interested, but 100 people almost it was like 99, made actual contributions to free software projects and worked with mentors to get started. So even though we only accepted 25, that additional 74 women who came and contributed have their start. They have contacts. They have people who they know they can contact if they need help. They know that if they want to contribute to a free and open source software project, they know how to get going. So that's a huge thing. But even better for us running the program, we have a much better idea of who these women are who are applying and whether they're going to be good. So we've seen them try to submit a patch. We've seen them, learning how to use Git or whatever it is that they need to do to get started, depending on what they're interested in working on. And we know that when they say they want to work on whatever, that they have the skills and the ability to do so, that they know how to come on IRC and talk to us about, whether they have problems. It's a really interesting way of making sure that we really understand. So by the time we actually go through and look at our funding and say, okay, we have, this many number of slots across these different projects, we also evaluate the women on an individual basis. We say, oh, I know this woman, she did this, this, and this, and that was pretty cool. Some of our stronger applications come in and they've already done quite a lot before their internship even starts, because they're so jazzed about the whole, about contributing to free and open source software, that once they get going, they keep going. So that's something that we really like. We also have a sample email and social network and flyers, so we really encourage other people to help us spread the word, and that works out pretty well. Once we run the program, once it starts, we make sure that women don't feel pressured to propose really ambitious projects for Outreach Program for Women. I think sometimes people get in trouble with their summer of code projects because they really want to do something super awesome, and so they propose an ambitious project, and then can't make good on that proposal. And we want to for Outreach Program for Women, we really want to avoid it, because we want women to have a really positive experience contributing to free and open source software, feeling like it's something they can contribute to on an ongoing basis. So we make sure that the tasks are really manageable, and then we try to encourage that mentors stay really involved, so that if the tasks are being completed really quickly, we ramp the person up to more. And so we try to get the most out of it by tailoring to small, manageable tasks that they can just they can knock out and start building their confidence in contributing to free and open source software. Also, they can see their their patches incorporated over the course of the project, which really has a really positive effect. We also require our participants to blog every other week. And that has been totally amazing with GNOME, because if you look at the GNOME planet, all of the Outreach Program for Women have their blogs aggregated on the planet. You see all these women who are doing great work for GNOME, and it changes your attitude when you look at the planet and you see a diverse set of women participating. So that's pretty great. I actually don't have this on a slide anywhere, but one of the inadvertent things that's really cool that happened with the program is that, because I don't know exactly why, but there's something about the way that we structured it to be inclusive for women that is inclusive for everybody, because this program has had a great result with geographic and ethnic diversity as well. It's not something we've ever tried to focus on, but it's worked out pretty well. I think there are some areas we could do better on, but in the last round we had at least one participant from each habitable continent. And we're not doing anything particular to try to recruit that, and we just accepted who we thought were the most exceptional candidates. We just went through and said, who are the most talented of these applicants that we know we want to have in these free software projects, and that's, and it wound up to have that diversity, which I thought is really cool. There's probably a much more in-depth analysis to be done, but I'm sort of like, great. So we also have a specific IRC channel for women that participate in the program, and that's great because these women that participate in the program, they're working on their project, pretty much full time over the internship period, and they reach a lot of stumbling blocks, and they're not always going to want to complain or talk about things to their mentors or to other people in the project. And it's great because it helps build up relationships within the free and open source software community. And now that we're a bigger program than just GNOME, across different projects, which is really really helpful. I actually had a moment where I went to the IRC channel for support myself, because I posted a blog about a panel that I was on, or just like a picture of a panel I was on, and there was a picture of me with the 3 other panelists, and I was wearing a t-shirt that wasn't particularly tight, but it had the logo on my chest, and the first 3 comments were nice boobs, or some comment about that, and it was so off-putting, and I just like I read the comment and my face got red, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the Outreach Program for Women IRC channel and get some support. And it really was an amazing experience going there, and all these women who are newcomers saying, oh, that happened to me when I posted my first Outreach Program for Women blog post. I got a response about my appearance, and I could say, stick with it. This happens to everybody. It's not just you. And these kinds of support structure make a big difference. We also have regular meetings that we organize for the interns. We also did a meeting with OIN where we had a session on defensive patent publications, and basically just meetings where these women talk about the work that they're doing and feel integrated into a program and help building relationships, which makes a big difference as to whether they'll stick around later. And then we also, GNOME in particular, but until now, we've really left it up to the different organizations that have been participating. GNOME organizes the program, we administer it, and we handle the funds for the program. But until now, we've travel funding has not been a part of it. But we've decided that because at GNOME, what we've done is we've pretty much tried to sponsor all of the outreach program for women participants to come to GWADEC or particular hackfests that were around, to have them meet with their mentors in person and start to work. It really makes a huge difference because it builds relationships and makes people really want to continue to contribute to the communities that they've become a part of. So what we're doing is now, with the Outreach Program for Women, we're building in a $500 travel stipend as well as a part of this program, because if we don't bring women to our conferences, we're much less likely to have them build the kind of permanent relationships that cause them to continue to participate when their internship is over. I'll come to the part about our own experience with the Outreach Program for Women. We also, the GNOME Foundation is set up to try to help provide travel assistance. Well, for a lot of reasons, but one of the things we do is to help try to provide travel assistance to people who can't afford it to come and contribute to GNOME. So this falls within that. So after the program, we try to emphasize to mentors. We realize that mentorship is probably the most important part of this program. Our program is only as good as the experiences that these participants have, and their experience is only as good as the mentorship that they get. So we try to provide good resources for mentors so that they know how to be good mentors. Some things are not obvious when you first become. I'm a mentor in the program as well, and sometimes it's even me as an administrator and organizer of the program. The first time I did it, I didn't think that I should have a regular weekly meeting time with my intern, and then all of a sudden halfway through, I'd been traveling and I'd been speaking at conferences, and I realized that like 2 weeks had gone by and I hadn't talked to my intern, and she was spinning her wheels on a lot of things, and it was all my fault, really. So, sort of telling people, how to be good mentors really helps them. Now, I always have a regular time to talk to my intern, and it really helps. So that's one thing. And then what we do is that once the programs are over, we let people know that just because the program is over doesn't mean that the mentorship relationship has to end. So we make a big point to remind mentors to reach out to their interns in an ongoing way, to sort of see if they're still participating in the channel, check in with them, see if they need any help. Just because there's not a formal relationship anymore doesn't mean there can't be an informal mentorship relationship. We also encourage participants to pursue other free software opportunities. And we do that by maintaining a mailing list and letting people know, and people who participate in the channel. We've had a lot of people come through who were Outreach Program for Women participants who then followed up and had a GSOC internship, which is pretty cool. We encourage these women to present at conferences. Women are not as visible at conferences, and sometimes it's because women don't feel like they should hold themselves out as an expert. I actually haven't talked about this in public ever before, but I have a touch of imposter syndrome myself. And every time I go to give a talk, I kind of panic a little bit. And even on things like, I know that I am probably the person in the world who knows the most about software on implanted medical devices and the, free and open source software. And yet, every time, I'm the one who did that research and know what the FDA rules are, but every time I go to give that talk, I panic. Like, what if someone is going to ask me a question I don't know? I'm going to be exposed as being an imposter. So it's like really classic stuff. And so one of the things that helps is to just have somebody say, hey, you should give a talk. I find talking to you to be very interesting. I know that I don't know there's a phone. I don't know how that happened, but sometimes when I hear a sound like that, I wonder if it's defibrillator. But no, so encouraging people and telling them that they can give a talk. They've done the work that they were doing. They're an expert on it now. They've been through the outreach program for women. They know about that. And we find that women who come through the program are some of our most effective advocates for the program. At GWADEC, we have a lightning talk track where all of our Google Summer of Code students and our outreach program for women students talk about their experiences in the program. So we do lightning talks, and they're really great. We don't schedule anything conflicting. It's like a keynote track. So the entire GNOME community listens to these talks, meets these new people, hears what they're working on, and then knows to approach them if something comes up later, or knows who they are. And it's not an insignificant amount of work for these participants, because for a lot of them, English is their second language, and getting up and presenting in front of such a large group of people is quite stressful. But that experience lets them know that they can do it. And we really, really like that. So that's great. We also have a lot of our outreach program alumni becoming mentors, which is, I think, one of the best indicators of success. And I really like that. They also participate in staying active on the mailing list and answer questions. They're much more likely to sort of, be very friendly and welcoming, and there's just such a volume of questions from newcomers, and there's nothing worse than trying to ask a question and being told, you didn't read this wiki page, read the manual, or we're not interested in this question that you've asked. So having somebody say, hi, we're so excited that you came to our community. Thank you. You might want to look at this and look at that and look at this and look at that. And if you still have questions, contact me again. Makes a big difference. And they also help spread the word, which is really important. Another point that I'd want to make is that even for the women so most of the women that have come through the program so far have stuck around, and it's easier to talk about GNOME because we've been doing it for a number of rounds. I'm not sure how it's going to fall out for the other organizations that have been joining us. I expect they'll have a similar experience to us. So we have a lot of women sticking around, great numbers on that. But even for the women who don't, they understand the value of free and open source software. They know a little bit about our community, and they know the combination of, of corporate drive plus hobbyist enthusiasm plus, a real understanding of why free and open source software can change the world. And so even if they don't stick around in our particular projects, they've become advocates for us, which is, I think, really important. So integration into the community is one of the important things that we've tried to do with the program by having those lightning talks. One of the things that we did at GWADEC was we had like a sort of scavenger hunt activity for all of our newcomers, where we gave them a bunch of questions and set them loose with cameras and with video cameras, and had them go around and ask the experienced hackers questions about them. They had to answer a certain number of questions, and so you can see that. So these are some of our GNOME hackers that were photographed by the newcomers, and then this is one of our newcomer teams taking a picture of themselves using cheese. And then we gave awards for the people who got the best, had the most questions answered, and this is them receiving the certificate at GWADEC, which is really fun, but also is a way of teaching these these newcomers a little bit about GNOME culture. They got the inside jokes really fast. So we have this thing at GNOME is there a Swedish conspiracy? There's no Swedish conspiracy. So we had them the interns ask, is there a Swedish conspiracy? And they didn't know. They're like, find out what the Swedish conspiracy is. And so they asked 20 people who are like, there's no Swedish conspiracy. And so now, when somebody asks them down the road, what's the Swedish conspiracy? They'll say, oh, there is no Swedish conspiracy. And it just sort of it's a silly example, but it permeates the project culture and really, really helps. So this is, we also did at GWADEC, we had a paper yearbook of all of our Google Summer of Code and outreach program for women participants, so that they could sort of, they had something physical to take away, for one thing, which they, as a sort of souvenir of their participation, but also had their, different pictures if they wanted to be included. It's not required for the program, and also a little facts about themselves, so they were able to read it, and that was a fun touch. I chose this page because this is Emily was my mentee in marketing, and she was amazing. She's one of my favorite stories because she originally applied for outreach program for women as a marketing intern, and she didn't get it. she really wasn't one of the stronger applicants. We were very friendly to her, but she just wasn't accepted. But she had a good experience because we were very friendly about it, and so she stuck around, and she actually started contributing. She made a contribution as part of her application process. She was writing, helping us to write some of our marketing materials, she's a native English speaker, which is a skill in and of itself, just rewriting some of the stuff that other people had written and finding typos, and she continued to do that and kept building up and building up. By the time the next Outreach Program for Women round came up, she was one of our stronger applicants because she was already had a lot of experience in the community, and she knew a lot of the work that needed to be done. So we accepted her as a marketing intern. We had a great experience with her. She was fabulous. She was so jazzed about the GNOME community that she went and took a couple of programming classes and participated and started participating as a hacker. She became a Summer of Code student as well with us, which is kind of cool, using all of the relationships she built during the Outreach Program for Women experience. And now she's just an active GNOME hacker, and she participates in some of the top-level discussions that sometimes even I'm a little intimidated to jump into. We have a lot of the Outreach Program for Women alums jumping into those discussions because they have such great connections with the community. They feel like their opinion will be valued, and it's actually really changing the tenor of the community because there are so many female voices. It's really an amazing experience. So one of the things that we've found from this program is that we actually, all of the things that we've been doing to encourage women to succeed with us also helps everybody else. So one of the things that we've done is by identifying by identifying mentors for the Outreach Program for Women, we also identify mentors for just anyone to come in. So now we have a list of people that we maintain who are very happy to answer questions, very happy to help people who are just getting started. We've really made a lot of effort at trying to identify projects that are very easy to get started on. We have a GNOME Love Bug initiative where we have beginner bugs, and we find that that makes it a lot easier for newcomers to get started. And so by doing these things to help encourage women, we actually help all newcomers get started. So we've seen a lot of benefit from that as well. Now for our Summer of Code participation, we require applicants to make a contribution before they can do Summer of Code with us, which means that we have a much better idea of who these people are and what they're capable of, and what we're in for. This is a list of all of the projects that are participating with the outreach. They either participated in the last round or participating with this round, and there are like 5 more that I know are coming for the next round that might sneak in this application process, but it's getting to be an ever impressive list, and I would be remiss of talking about the Outreach Program for Women without identifying our sponsors, who have been very, very generous and have helped us keep this program going, which is amazing. I was going to say corporate sponsors, but the Free Software Foundation has been a financial sponsor as well. A lot of the organizations that I listed before have fronted money as well. So like the GNOME Foundation, for example, we allocate money out of our general funds for the program to fund interns as well. I haven't listed them on the corporate sponsorship page because it's sort of part of the organizational participation. But some of the organizations are fronting money in and of themselves, which I think is pretty amazing. So I think that in a talk about bringing more women to free and open source software, bringing women into our community isn't quite enough. We also have to make sure that we create an environment where women feel like they can participate, that they're not going to have really negative experiences when they come to our conferences. And so I wanted to point out the ADA initiative, of which I'm an advisor for, and the things that this is a list of their activities. I would say so. ADA Camp is the conference that the ADA initiative runs for women, and there's also an allies track for others who want to participate. But I would say that it was at ADA Camp, the first ADA Camp in Australia was one that I went to, and it was the first time that I realized how prevalent imposter syndrome was for women in technology. It's an unconference, so I put my Post-it up of imposter syndrome because it was sort of like the thing I never want to talk about. I don't want anyone to know I have imposter syndrome. I want to seem like I'm a really confident speaker and I know what I'm doing and I don't have any doubts about myself. But so I like sheepishly put up this, this sticky, and it was one of the first sessions that were run, and it was completely overrun. Like, it was almost all of the women who were there wanted to talk about imposter syndrome and how they felt like they related to that, and it was really amazing. And if it weren't for Ada Camp, I wouldn't have had that experience, and I feel a lot more confident. First of all, telling people that this is something that I experience, because it was so amazing to me to see all of the accomplished women who had identified themselves as having imposter syndrome. It made me understand, that it was okay. So Ada Camp is an amazing thing. And then the AIDA initiative, of course, it has helped put a lot of conference policies in place, which are very helpful, establishing safe environments. And there's a lot of education, advising of organizations, and they hold workshops and stuff. It's a really great organization. And I think that it's important to there are a bunch of different women's initiatives, and I think people try to choose which ones they support. And I think that there's a place for all of the initiatives to include women in free software that I'm aware of. They all sort of fit a different point in the life cycle of like a person's participation in free and open source software. So as I said before, it's like we could bring them in, but if they have a bad experience at a conference, chances are they won't stick around. So I think that's pretty important. These are some upcoming deadlines. The Outreach Program for Women application deadline is May 1st. There's still time. There are a lot of women here. The only requirements for being an Outreach Program for Women participant is that you identify as a woman, you have not participated before, and you're over 18, and you have this, you have the drive and the talent to participate. So I encourage all the women here to think about applying to the program. There's still time. Some of our applications are stronger for women that start their initial contribution at the beginning, but some of our very strongest candidates heard about it only at the last minute and put on a last minute push in 12 hours to make their contribution, and they wound up having a great experience. Then there's the next Ada Camp is actually in San Francisco, so if people are local, you should consider participating in that. For the women in the room, the Ada Camp, it's a invitation only, so you should apply as soon as possible. But then for everybody else, there's also an allies track, which women are invited to as well, and men. So that's going to happen at the same time to talk about some of the issues about including women in free and open source software. And then we've got the next Outreach Program for Women round. We do 2 a year, as I said, one in the one in the summer and then one in the Southern Hemisphere summer. So we do one in winter and one in summer, and that's coming up too. Please help us. You can help by telling people about the program. If you know very talented women, tell them that they should apply. If you're a member of a free and open source software project, consider joining the program. It really does make a big difference. And if you're working for a company that might have the budget to do so, please consider asking them to help sponsor the program, or just contact me and I can help make a pitch. And then donate to the GNOME Foundation, because we administer the program. Actually, we've been doing so out of our general funds. We've only been, until now, we've been fundraising just for the money to pay the interns, and then everything else, all the overhead, has come out of our general funds, all of our administrators' time, which is considerable. And then that's not to mention all of the wiring fees, which have been $90 per intern outside of the US. It really adds up over time. So we're adding an optional administrative fee now. We just really don't want funding to prevent people from participating in the program. But if you donate to the GNOME Foundation, it'll help us continue to run it. And I love, this is one of the little pictures from one of the cartoons that we have to explain how to contribute to free software and how to make your first contribution to free and open source software. And as I said before, we've had really great success with GNOME in having women participate in free and open source software, but the Google team has worked really hard to improve the percentages. And so I think the overall GSOC percentages were 7.1 in 2011 and 8.3 in 2012. And so if you know women who are talented developers, get them to apply, and students for Google Summer of Code, get them to apply to Summer of Code, and we'll see if we can we can get the percentage up to 12% this year. This is Marina's number, actually. I think it's a little ambitious, but only by setting lofty goals can we get there. So, does anybody have any questions or thoughts? Come talk to me. Email us. There's a great wiki. I should have said gnome.org/OPW is the website that you can go to, or you can just search for Outreach Program for Women and it'll get you there, or come talk to me. We've got a whole section on how participants or how organizations can participate and how they can join, and we also have a like a getting started bit. So all free software projects need to do to join is to have the money for at least one intern allocated. So I fundraise for the program generally. I also fundraise for GNOME internships. But in order for us to be sure that we'll be definitely able to get at least one intern to an organization, we have to have funding allocated already. But I make myself available for doing fundraising. If you have a company that's active in your space that you think will fund the program, I'm happy to make a pitch to them. So so the first thing, so you need to have the funds. Right. And then we also need to have great mentors. So if you want to participate, you have to make sure that you have people who are really committed to mentoring in the program. If you participate in the program but you don't have great mentors, then it's just not going to be successful. So we need to have a mentor, and then you just need to have very basic administration. So we do most of the administration. You just need to have somebody who's going to put up a wiki landing page. Did I miss anything? No. Okay. Any other questions?
Do you publish a list of contributions, areas where people can contribute to?
We do. It's different by project, so some projects are a little bit better about this than others. You can take a look at our past participants really easily. We make sure that when the round is over, we describe all of the work done by all of the participants. We're a nonprofit, and we like to do everything transparently too. So in addition to requiring the blogs, we also write up summaries of everybody's work at the end so that people know where our money goes. You can also take a look at, because we have the lists of mentors, you'll see what areas they're involved in. And then we have project idea pages, and we encourage all of the projects that participate in the Outreach Program for Women to have really extensive project pages where you can look and say, oh, okay, so I can be a marketing intern and work on ways of improving our website for newcomers, or I can help write an annual report, and then there are all of the Google Summer of Code project ideas, which could be Outreach Program for Women slots for women who are not students. One of the things that I didn't mention also is that the way that we handle the program is very helpful in that it's a full-time commitment, but people work at home. And so it's really good for women who might be in a stage of life where they couldn't necessarily go into an office. We've had several participants who, one woman who gave birth in the middle of the internship, and then other women who are, responsible for childcare and are able to do so flexibly while they work. So, it's nice because it helps sort of target a group of people that we haven't previously been targeting. But not all projects are as good about having project ideas. So some projects do a better job than others. Any other questions? Yeah.
I understand you say that grown to the point now where even those that can't participate in the internships have a mentor. So say for my example, I want to start contributing to the community and participate. Is there a mentor out there that I could?
Yeah, so you can look at the list of mentors and just contact them and say, I don't have the time to fully commit to an internship, but I'm really interested in contributing. Can you help me get started? And then they'll probably wind up encouraging you to join the IRC channel. Then you'll chat with them, and then you'll say, do you have any ideas for what I can work on? They'll say, yeah, here are some 3 things that we'd love for you to work on. And then because they're used to doing that with the Outreach Program for Women, there's that infrastructure in place and that expectation. So I found at least, I'm a mentor with the marketing, so that's why I'm using marketing as an example, even though it's the exception. There aren't that many marketing internships that are available. Most of them are coding. and then there's documentation and design. But I use marketing as an example because that's the direct experience that I have with the program. But so for that, we constantly are getting newcomers in who now contact me and say, oh, or, can you help me? I'd love to contribute to marketing. And so our marketing team has grown, not just with women, but with everyone, because now people know, oh, okay, if I want to contribute to marketing, I know this is the IRC channel I'm supposed to join. I know who the people are, at least who one or two people are, and I can say hi to them, and they'll say hi to me and ask me who I am, and then they'll care. And then if I join the biweekly marketing meeting, they'll be really excited, and yeah, so it's really fun. Anything else? Thank you all for listening and for caring about this issue. I really appreciate it.